Good morning. It is Tuesday, February the 22nd, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. This is Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the daily declaration for spiritual warfare and the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have whining and complaining, everything you know is wrong, character matters, no free lunch, and Tucker Carlson. Almost forgot one of the best parts here. Tucker Carlson. So all that and more when I come back. Thank you. Ineffable Creator, who out of the treasures of thy wisdom has appointed 3 hierarchies of angels and set them in admirable order high above the heavens, and has disposed the divers portion of the universe in such marvelous array. Thou who art called the true source of light and supereminent principle of wisdom, be pleased to cast a beam of thy radiance upon the darkness of my mind and dispel me from the double darkness of sin and ignorance in which I have been born. Thou who makest eloquent the tongues of little children, fashion my words and pour upon my lips the grace of thy benediction. Grant me penetration to understand, capacity to retain, method and facility in study, subtlety in interpretation, and abundant grace of expression. Order the beginning, direct the progress, and perfect the achievement of my work. Thou who art true God and man, and livest and reignest forever and ever. Amen. Thank you. And now the daily declaration for spiritual warfare for February 22nd. I will stretch out my arm to deliver you. There is nothing like me among all heavenly beings. I am mighty, and my faithfulness surrounds you. I will crush and scatter your enemies with my strong arm. I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of your oppressors. I will free you and will redeem you with my outstretched arm and with my mighty acts of judgment. I will stretch out my right hand, and the earth will swallow your enemies. With my unfailing love, I will lead you to my holy dwelling. Terror and dread will fall on your enemies, and by the power of my arm, they will be as still as a stone until you have passed by in safety. Isaiah chapter 52, verse 10, Psalm 89, verses 6 through 13, Exodus chapter 15, verses 12 through 16. Prayer declaration. No one has an arm like you, Lord, full of power and might. Your hand is strong, and your right hand is held high. You will stretch out your arm and deliver me, and rid me out of all bondage. Let fear and dread fall upon the enemy by the greatness of your arm until I pass over. Favor me, and let your right arm bring me into my possession. Amen. And that was the daily declaration for spiritual warfare for February the 22nd. Thank you, thank you. Who is the true conservative? He is the person that has the courage of his convictions and is confident in what he knows. He is the person that understands that cultural conservatism is more important than political conservatism. He is not selfish, but minds his own business. He acts like an adult. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He expresses what he knows and does so with certainty. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American, and he's better than the socialist. He's a better friend, father, brother, family member, and a better person, period. You have to know that. If you don't know with every fiber of your being that being a true conservative is best, then you're wasting your time. Thank you, thank you. And now there's no free lunch. It seems to be almost a law of human nature that it is easier for people to agree on a negative program, on the hatred of an enemy, on the envy of those better off, than on any positive task. The contrast between the we and the they, the common fight against those outside the group, seems to be an essential ingredient in any creed which will solidly knit together a group for common action. From their point of view, it has the great advantage of leaving them greater freedom of action than almost any positive program. F.A. Hayek. Covetousness not only carries the emotional gratification of resenting someone else, but it seeks to relieve oneself of the burdens and responsibilities of action. For that reason, it is a double sin. It contains all the corrosive elements of disdaining others for their success while simultaneously preventing us from being our best selves. And that was There's No Free Lunch.
Welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, you've got to feel a little bad for the many heads of Western democracies. For them, the end of the coronavirus pandemic is really the worst thing they can imagine. Put yourself in their position. For 2 years, you've wielded unprecedented power over your country. You've told citizens where and when they can work and shop and worship and go outside. You've controlled what they wear. You've decided how their children will be educated and what drugs they must put into their bodies. For a person with no useful skills and limited job prospects in the real economy, and that describes all of them, it's been an extraordinary experience. No Democratic leader in history has ever been this powerful as you are right now. You're like a god. Each morning you wake up and survey your creation and you revel in your omnipotence. You can hardly believe how far you've come. The last thing you want is for all of it to end. But of course it is ending. The virus that gave you these powers is in retreat. It's no longer a public health emergency. The vaccine that you promised would be a panacea didn't work in the ways you pledged they would. They didn't stop infection or transmission. Now you've done your best to hide that fact, but everybody knows it. So for you, the jig is up. The ball is over. It's almost midnight. Just a few hours from now, you will once again be merely a scullery maid. You'll be taking orders from your citizens rather than giving them. And the thought of that sends you into a panic. What do you do next? How do you make this moment last forever? There's only one way. You must find a new emergency that justifies making your powers permanent. If you're going to remain God, you're going to need a devil to fight. So if you're wondering why so many Western leaders suddenly are vilifying their own populations, people they were supposed to represent, this is why. Find an enemy, create a crisis, stay in power forever. It's the oldest recipe for tyranny that there is. If we don't recognize it in our own age, it's only because nothing like this was supposed to happen in a democracy. But it is happening, most clearly in Canada. Last week, Justin Trudeau used a peaceful trucker strike to declare martial law. Trudeau seized control of the police. He shut down opposition media coverage. He declared himself the final arbiter of all financial transactions in the nation of Canada. These are dictatorial powers. But they were necessary, Trudeau explained, because this was an emergency. white supremacists and other sedition-minded forces backed by foreign saboteurs, sound familiar, threatened the very existence of Canada. The truckers were effectively an invading army. Well, over the weekend, Trudeau defeated that army. They were unarmed. He is not. Trudeau cleared the trucker strike by force. Yet his emergency powers remained. Today, Justin Trudeau explained that he will remain in full control of Canada indefinitely, and that's essential, he said, to keep Canada safe. But the video tells a very different story. In fact, it's Trudeau's crackdown on human rights that has put Canadians in danger. Watch Trudeau's forces tell this woman that she's no longer allowed to record what happens in her own city.
I just want to get a coffee, okay?
Why is the camera in my face right now? Are you here partaking?
You walk
Right
up
now
to
you're
me.
in the red zone?
I'm scared. I want to go for a coffee down there.
See, we'll be patrolling all day. We see you again, it'll be different. We tell you, take your camera and get out of here. Do you understand that?
I'm walking away.
Walk away. Your phone doesn't need to be in our face when you're walking away. Go.
I just want a cup of coffee. Get out of here. Multiply what you just saw by an entire country, and that's Canada tonight. There's no longer any pretext that this is about the COVID pandemic. No one in Trudeau's government is trying to protect Canadians from anything, much less a virus. This is political repression. If you doubt that, consider what happened to a place called the Ionic Cafe. That's a coffee shop in downtown Ottawa. On Sunday, riot police tried to break into the cafe and shut it down. Why? Because the proprietors had dared to serve coffee to the truckers during the protest. Under Justin Trudeau, that is now a crime. A man called Enrico, who works at the cafe, said he saw Trudeau's forces mistreat a civilian on the sidewalk, possibly like the mistreatment you just saw. When he told them to back off, hey, this is Canada, they turned on him.
Okay, share this out, you guys. Get it out everywhere. Now, get it out. They're saying they're going to break the window. They already walked around back, you guys, so...
I know they can't get in because they're breaking in and then they'll have to say that pay the thing so they can't.
Here's your tax service. Here's your taxes at play, everyone. Welcome to absolute tyranny.
So that kind of thing is happening all over the capital city of Canada. The virus is in retreat, but there's a new crisis, and that crisis is disobedience. Last week, we showed you the footage of Trudeau's forces trampling a woman with horses. Now, internal texts show the officers who rode those horses celebrated what they did. Quote, "Just watch that horse video. That is awesome," said one officer. Awesome. An elderly woman being trampled by a horse. The Canadian government has confirmed that those texts are real. But none of the supposedly progressive politicians in Canada care in the least. No one on the Canadian left, or the American left for that matter, has condemned any of this or any other grotesque violation of human rights in Canada. State media aren't even reporting that it's happening. But it is happening. Over the weekend, this show obtained footage of a particularly brutal beating in Ottawa during the crackdown. Watch as the man in the orange jacket is kneed repeatedly by Trudeau's men.
You can hear the noises of people getting shoved around outside, being arrested, man being kneed there. It's terrible.
Kneeing him again and again and again. He wasn't resisting. And the man who shot that footage is called David Paisley. He runs a website called shedmedia.ca. Police have arrested Paisley and seized the camera equipment he used to shoot that $5,000 worth. Now, we thought that video was remarkable, so we alerted several Canadian media outlets over the weekend, including CBC and CTV, to this footage. And we gave them David Paisley's contact information, news organization to news organization. But none of them reported on it. So we looked into it ourselves. Several protesters who were there said that a trucker in an orange jacket called Chaba Vizzi was attacked by police officers during the crackdown. We reached Chaba Vizzi, and he confirmed it and provided this footage. It shows him exiting his cab calmly, kneeling down in front of his truck, and clasping his hands behind his head. Watch.
I'm proud you're here.
Oh, c'est dur, hein?
I don't speak French.
Ah, it's very hard. But you don't lose.
No, I'm not.
Second button.
As soon as they let me out, I'll be back. I'm going down. I'm going down on my knee, hands behind my back.
Okay.
I'm so ready.
Because
I know. I'm peacefully protesting.
look at that guy.
So the man surrenders on camera, and then he's kneed repeatedly into submission. Now, we'd love to show you more footage, but it turns out none of Justin Trudeau's men was wearing a body camera at the time. That's pretty weird. No one in Canadian state media cares to follow up on that story, and so they're not. They don't care either. In a moment, we're going to speak to the man who you saw being beaten on camera, Chapa Vizzi, and he'll give you all the details. He joins us in just a moment. The brutality, though, is just one element of this crackdown. On Saturday, Ottawa's new police chief promised to hunt down the regime's enemies, no matter where they are, in coming months, and ruin them financially. Watch.
So I will stand here today again and say, this demonstration is over. Go home. If you don't go home, we will remove you from the streets. If you are involved in this protest, we will actively look to identify you and follow up with financial sanctions and criminal charges. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. If you are involved in a protest, you'll be sanctioned and charged. What does that mean exactly? Well, last night, Justin Trudeau's government announced that is also going after anyone who, quote, directly or indirectly participated in the protests. According to Mark Strahl, who's a member of Canadians Parliament, the dragnet has ensnared one of his constituents. It's a woman called Brianne. Her crime? Donating $50 to the truckers. In response, quote, her bank account has now been frozen. Brianne is a single mom from Chilliwack working a minimum wage job. She now has no money at all. So under Trudeau's new order, she won't simply lose access to her bank account. She will also lose access to credit unions, co-ops, trusts, and loan providers. This is what the collapse of democracy looks like. It's not simply beating people in the streets. It's making it impossible for them to live because you steal all their money. You award yourself the power to control every dollar in your country. Where's that power come from? Well, it's a self-appointed power that Justin Trudeau has. And you prevent anyone from speaking out against you. So Trudeau is not just targeting people who parked their trucks in Ottawa. He's crushing anyone who supports them. He's going after their employers. Over the weekend, the owner of a trucking company in Ontario received this threatening call from Trudeau's authorities. Listen.
My job is to phone the registered owner of the trucks to ask them if they're still in Ottawa, and if they are still in Ottawa, I was to tell the registered owners that now they can be subject to the new measures under the Emergency Measures Act, so they can seize assets and freeze bank accounts and all that kind of stuff.
So Trudeau's government is promising to seize company assets and zero out bank accounts because one company truck parked on the street in Ottawa. It's not simply an overreaction, a grotesque overreaction to a peaceful protest. It's a wild and unprecedented expansion of powers that is permanent and that make democracy impossible. Canada's finance ministry explained that Trudeau is not going to give up this power ever.
We will be putting forward measures to put those tools permanently in place. The authorities of FinTrack, I believe, do need to be expanded to cover crowdsourcing platforms and payment platform and their payment providers. So that is something that we need to do, and we will do, and that needs to be in place permanently.
You'll notice that some of the harshest authoritarians, not simply in Canada, but across the West, speak in light, lilting voices, going up on the last syllable. They don't sound like Mussolini, but they've awarded themselves greater powers. By the way, this all seems to have happened overnight in Canada, but that's simply because most Americans don't pay attention. A year ago, Canada's government began debating something called C-36. That bill would allow activists to head to court and accuse someone of, quote, contemplating hate speech. Not even saying something unauthorized, just thinking about saying it. So what is hate speech exactly, and what does it look like to contemplate it? Well, Back around 2020, a man living in British Columbia wrote to complain to a Canadian government official called Bob Ray. The man wrote that, quote, "You and your government have blood on your hands for not quarantining Canada's borders before we'd imported COVID from around the world," end quote. Now, you can agree with that or disagree with it, but it's hardly a wild opinion, and of course it will always be permitted in an actual democracy. But the Canadian official's response, Bob Ray's response, quote, "Worthy of a block, hate speech. Criticize me, the person in power, and now it's hate speech." Now, contemplating saying something like that is itself a crime. Canadian government officials like Bob Ray can send people who criticize them to jail. Trudeau's government has moved to reintroduce Bill C-36, quote, as quickly as possible. Now, the Biden administration, you should know and not forget, has encouraged all of this. Vladimir Putin is the tyrant, they tell us, not Justin Trudeau. At this point, it's pretty clear that if you want to know the future they are planning for us in the United States, look north to Canada. Now, as promised, we're joined by Chaba Aziz, one of the truck drivers who was attacked by Justin Trudeau's police. He arrived in Canada.
So I'm not going to continue with that part of the Tucker's show. He interviews the trucker, and it's a Romanian guy who went to Canada after the fall of Ceausescu, and so it basically compares Romania to Canada, and Canada was always such a great, free, and happy place, and he was amazed by it and whatnot. So that kind of thing. What I wanted to communicate was that Tucker's analysis was a little bit short. He basically said that the whole reason this is happening is because of power lust. And while that is certainly plausible, certainly it seems very commonsensical that people in power want to stay in power, it leaves you wanting. What else? There's got to be something else, because remember, these folks are moral agents, and they're doing what they're doing because they believe they are right. Okay, as odd as that may sound, because you think, well, right about what? And that's the key. You got to figure out, why are they really doing this? There's got to be more to it than just trying to stay in power, because it's not a dictatorship. Trudeau knows that at this particular point, I think that he's doing what he does because he knows that he's done. He's toast. That the next election, he's out. And so they figure, well, in for a dime, in for a dollar. But the real reason that they do it, because this is not just Canada, Australia did the same thing. I mean, unbelievable crackdowns. And it's supposed to be in a free society. And they locked up their countries tighter than this former Soviet Union or the communist China. And they did it because of single-payer health care. As I've put out on Twitter on several occasions, single-payer is the root of all evil. Things don't just happen, they're made to happen. So said John F. Kennedy, and he's right. We don't have a free society and then just wake up one day and we're surrounded by tyranny. If we're being subjected to tyrannical activities, it's because other people have made it that way and we have allowed them to do so. In the United States of America, we're subjected to tyranny because we allowed our governors and legislatures to create faux dictatorships, these emergency dictator orders in which the governor gets to rule by decree. And that's BS. There's no such thing in the Constitution. There's no allowance for that. It doesn't work. There's no such thing as God-given rights except if there's an emergency. It doesn't work. So, and then the same thing goes with Canada, where what happened here is the Canadians said yes to single-payer health care. They didn't think that this would be the result, but it is. And the reason I'm saying that is if you stop and think about it, you have a COVID, this pandemic going around, and that every person in Canada gets free health care. So you go, the Canadian person that gets COVID and maybe has to go on a ventilator into the intensive care unit, that's very expensive. Now, if you multiply that individual by 10,000 or 100,000 or hundreds of thousands, you begin to see the enormity of the expense for the Canadian healthcare system. And the problem is it's all taxpayer funded. So that means that if the healthcare system, Canadian healthcare system, goes bankrupt, it will most probably take the government with it. So if the Canadian healthcare system fails, the government will fail, and they may very well have not enough money to pay their bills, to pay the debts on that they've incurred. Maybe not even enough money to pay the bureaucrats, to pay the military, to pay the police departments, etc. The entire country, not just Canada, but any country that has single payer may be plunged into anarchy. Now, whether that's real or not, that's what they imagine. And they are scared to death. That's why they're doing what they're doing. People don't go around acting like thugs, otherwise moral agents that are out and who have jobs to help people and do legitimate law enforcement. Don't go around acting like thugs unless they're scared, unless they are absolutely terrified. And that's also the reason why the United States has escaped the same kind of crackdowns that you've seen in Australia, Canada, and elsewhere in the world, is because we don't have single payer, at least not at the federal level. Now, you have seen with the United States, part of the problem is Social Security. Well, it's actually Medicare, and then the states have their own Medicare-style programs. So, but those are for the elderly and maybe for a few people that are disabled. But it's not for the entire population at large. The issue in the United States is insurance companies. The insurance companies are the ones that are going to have to go ahead and pay for people going into the hospital, let's say Kaiser, and if they have to get onto a ventilator, again, very expensive, multiply that by tens or hundreds of thousands, and maybe Kaiser is looking at bankruptcy. So Kaiser and other health companies go to the President of the United States and says, you got to do something. You got to keep people indoors or give them masks or whatever you've got to do. Otherwise, we are going to go bankrupt. So it is single-payer healthcare that is the worst of it. And by the way, if you're paying insurance and your insurance company goes to the government and says, we can't make the claims, we can't pay the claims, that's fraud. You're paying premiums. I'm paying premiums to Kaiser Permanente or Blue Cross or whomever, and they promise that they will pay all my claims, all my legitimate claims, let's put it that way. And so then to come back later and say, oh, sorry, we're bankrupt because we can't pay your claims, that is just simply fraud. At the very least, it's breach of contract. But again, for the rest of the world where you have these hideous crackdowns, single-payer health care is the root of all evil. Back in a minute. Thank you. So listening to Winchell and Mahoney this morning on the guys that took over the Rush Limbaugh show, and they're again whining and complaining. They're back at it again. All of these people on the right wing are they're doing it wrong. They're doing themselves. They're doing conservatism a big disservice, and they get a lot of this from Rush Limbaugh, who unfortunately in his post-addiction career spent most of the time just whining and complaining. And it's too bad, but that's basically what he did. Now that's what they do. And they're whining and complaining about comparing what's going on in Canada to what's going on with BLM. And we're getting all the, if we did that, or if the horse incident where a police officer in Canada was mounted and he just basically ran over one of the protesters. And so then it was, if an officer ran over a protester here in the United States during a BLM riot, blah, blah, blah. So we get to hear that all over again. And two problems with that. Number one is, why do we want to do that? Is that what we're about? We're conservatives, so we want to get the police officers out on their horses to run over protesters? Okay, this is the same mistake that the right makes all the time. Well, how come the left gets to talk like racists and we don't? Because we don't want to? Hello? And then it's always, then the media would be this, and it usually comes down to media unfairness. Well, they're not covering things equally. So what? So what? Do something about it. Take some of the millions and trillions of dollars that you're making behind the microphone and go out and buy CNN, buy MSNBC, create your own network. Somebody out there created one news network, another one created Newsmax. Create more of those news networks until the right outnumbers the left in terms of news networks and can literally drown them out. And then they will no longer care, and they will no longer be relevant. They will no longer be mainstream media. It is long past time that true conservatives become mainstream media, because we are mainstream, because we're realistic. Okay, we acknowledge reality and the left refuses to do so. Okay, so that's what you do. Quit complaining. And in the meantime, what you do with situations like with Trudeau calling out his stormtroopers, if you will, to go out and crush the resistance, is you just taunt him. You got three ways to go about it. You can taunt, or you can also use make fun of him, mock him, or you can also act defiantly. And so something along the lines of, okay, that's all right, Mr. Trudeau, because you're going to be finished anyways. In the next election, you're toast. You know that because this is being broadcast all over the world. All of Canada gets to see you for exactly what it is that you are. Plus, then the Canadian people are going to go ahead and rise up, and they're going to do away with emergency powers altogether, which is what they should have done to begin with. The Canadians have the same problem Americans have, that Americans were sleeping when the government conspired against them. When the government went ahead and said, we're going to create these emergency dictatorships, and it's going to be up to the governor and the legislature to decide when these emergencies occur, that's when we got screwed. Okay, so now it's too late to run out and say, oh, gee, I don't like the mask mandate. Too late. He's already invoked his powers that we gave to him, months, years, or decades ago. What it's time to do is go to Sacramento and take those powers back. And it's the same thing with Canada. Canada allowed the Canadians allowed their government to create a dictatorship whenever the government felt like it. No. And hopefully the Canadians have learned that lesson. If there's anything to be learned from what's happening in Canada, that's it. Okay, that you do not give your government. No democratic government has dictatorial authority. It's a conflict of interest. It's a contradiction. You don't do it. They don't need it. There is no such thing as some kind of a national emergency. It doesn't exist. Okay, so we don't give them those powers. We made the error of turning a blind eye to them seizing those kinds of powers and enacting them, and now it's time to take those powers back because they cannot be trusted with it. But in the meantime, we don't whine or complain about it. We present a positive, defiant front. We tell people like Trudeau, that's okay. Today you have your day, but every dog has his day. We will have ours. And when it comes to the polls, when it comes to the next election, you're finished. You will not be able to be prime minister. You won't be a member of parliament. You won't even be able to be elected to dog catcher when we get done with you. That's the way you do it. That's going to motivate your audience. Instead of sitting back, whining and complaining, how come the news media doesn't, why aren't they fair? Shut up. I mean, if that's all these two boobs have to offer frickin' frack on 11:50 a.m. The Patriot, if that's all they've got to offer, they should shut up and go home. All of the revolutions in this country, social revolutions, have started with the idea, with the phrase, everything you know about X is wrong. That's the way it started. So, abortion starts with everything you know about sex is wrong. Everything the sexual revolution. And that started with that. Everything you know about sex and dating and getting married and raising children is wrong. And so then they go ahead and these so-called experts, self-appointed experts, come out, write books to tell you what is the right way to approach sex and dating and the whatnot. So, and it's again a self-proclaimed revolution. It doesn't really exist. It's just a psychological, not even a phenomenon. It's just a con job. But they always start with that. So whenever you hear somebody, or you, especially on television, somebody's selling a book and the book is about everything you know about whatever it is wrong, you know that this is a person that's trying to create a revolution. So be on the alert for that. And if you do decide that you want to read the book, be very, I was going to say skeptical, but that's not really the word that I'm looking for. You want to read this with, as they used to say, a jaundiced eye. Be very, very vigilant and look for places where they're trying to not persuade you, but manipulate you. And that's the important thing. But again, to review, all of the social revolutions in this country start with an everything you know about X is wrong. And so when you hear that, be alert. Thank you. Sitting in my car, trying to get this recorded because it's just too good to be true. Another example of faux conservatism, a faux conservative, Sean Hannity, who pretends to be a conservative but really isn't. And most of the time, he and other people waffle. But the example is his send-off of Bob Beckel, who apparently passed away yesterday at the age of 73. And I'll do a little send off for him later, the way it should be done. But Sean Hannity does what all of the brainwashed people in this country do, and I used to do. All he talks about is Beckel's personality. He spends no time discussing Beckel's character. Was Bob Beckel a good man? Was Bob Beckel honest? Was Bob Beckel reliable? Was Bob Beckel thrifty? Was he a good provider? Was he a husband? Was he a womanizer? Talk about his character, but nobody does that anymore. Part of the reason people get themselves in a jam, marriage-wise or relationship-wise, is because they're judging people based on their personality instead of on their character. And so that's how you end up hooked up with socialists. And Bob Beckel was a socialist. And Sean Hannity goes on to describe, well, Beckel was a great friend, and he'd come over, and I gave him a key to the house, and the kids called him Uncle Bob, and blah, blah, blah. And again, he ends up with somebody in the house, a socialist in the house, who's going to do whatever he can to convert Sean Hannity to socialism. Socialists want to be your friend for only one reason. They want you to be a fellow traveler. They want you to help them promote socialism. So, again, Sean Hannity misses the boat. He misses the point here. He's not a conservative because he has no clue. He's been brainwashed by the left, by the cultural left, and he doesn't even realize it. So, Bob Beckel, you're going to give him a send-off, that's fine, but give him a send-off about his character. It reminds me of Rush Limbaugh, who gave a send-off for William F. Buckley Jr., and the last thing he said about William F. Buckley was he was so nice. He was a really nice man, was what he said, and I wanted to barf. Dogs get better send-offs than that. There's so much more to William F. Buckley than just being a nice man. He deserved a hell of a lot better than that. And I'm sure Beckel deserved a hell of a lot better as well. Make note of the fact that he is a socialist. Sean Hannity noted in passing that he was a liberal, blah, blah. But he talks all about his personality. Boy, I really like the guy. Why? Because he made you laugh. He smiled. Who cares? Hitler smiled. I'm sure Hitler had his gags and jokes too. Hitler loved animals. He loved pets. He was an anti-smoker. Hitler was. But that's, again, personality things. It has nothing to do with his character. You're not going to give Hitler the send-off of saying, well, he really liked animals. No, I'm sorry, you're missing it. And you got to get down to who was Bob Beckel in terms of character. And that's what every person out there that wants to be a true conservative, you have to start evaluating people and your relationships based on character. If you're not sure what constitutes character, look it up. Check, get on Kindle. There's a lot of good books on Kindle about character. So put the keyword in character and start reading up on what constitutes character. One of the other things that you can do, there's an excellent book by a cardinal, a Roman Catholic cardinal, called the Virtues, the Cardinal, I think it's the 4 Cardinal Virtues. And that's also character. That's really what character is. When you've got justice and temperance and things of that nature, then we're talking character. Cardinal virtues, and then there's 3, I guess they're non-cardinal virtues, which is faith, hope, and love. And but anyways, that's the place to start, is if you want to find out about character, and then evaluate your relationships, evaluate the people around you in terms, and ask yourself, Bilbo Baggins over there, who I consider a good friend, is he just? Is he temperate? Etc. And judge them by those standards. And it'll be interesting to find out where your so-called friends stand in relationship to character standards. So that's the difference between being a true conservative and being a faux conservative. True conservatives judge people based on their character. Faux conservatives judge people based on their personality. Thank you. Who is the socialist? He is the man that seeks consensus. He is subjective, petty, and small, taking everything in life personally. He's outrageous, boring, and rude. He pretends to be a leader and a change agent. He pretends that he's your friend. He is sly, cunning, and deceptive. He dresses, acts, and speaks like a slob. He's informal and terminally unique. He is childish and pretends that he knows nothing. He has no conscience and pretends that might makes right and that the ends justify the means. He's impulsive and rationalizes his behavior. He's deterministic, blaming others for his mistakes. He's skeptical, demanding that others solve his problems. His unreasonableness and irresponsibility make him a bad role model, bad father, brother, family member, friend, and a bad person, period. So if you think that you can be friends with a socialist, think again. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, reminding you to be honest, to be smart, to be beautiful, and to remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.